Buddy, I'll be talking about rare tumors in childhood today. What are rare tumors? They may be simply defined as those which have no treatment protocol available, but they have been defined as per incidence, more often coming to less than 15 per 1 lakh per year, which is defined by the National Cancer Institute in 2004. It was further revised in 2011 by the European Rare Care Consortium to incidence less than 6 per 1 lakh per year. And a very rare pediatric cancer has been reported to be less than 2 per 1 million per annum. And 11% of all cancers come under this category. So rare cancers are not collectively rare since they correspond to about 10 to 20% of all cancer cases, and it is essential to know regarding them. They may be rare independent of age, such as soft tissue tumor of biliary tract rhabdomyosarcoma, which depend whether adult or in children it is rare, or adult type tumors may be presenting in childhood, rare but typical childhood tumors, or common pediatric tumors with rare histology, or they may be of a rare location. And the International Pediatric Surgical Oncology Registry maintains, and there are other multiple registries which maintain data about epidemiology and incidence of such rare diseases and give us a broad spectrum and overview of such diseases. Coming to broad list of the rare childhood tumors that I'll be discussing today, will include inflammatory myofibroblastic tumors, Langerhans histiocytosis, fibromatosis, vascular tumors, mostly Kaposi sarcoma, head and neck nasopharyngeal carcinoma, salivary gland tumors, thymic tumors in the mediastinum, tracheal and bronchial carcinoids and pleuropulmonary blastomas, breast malignancies, abdominal tumors including peritoneal mesothelioma, sarcoma, desmoplastic round cell tumors, and the GIT will cover the smooth cell tumors, GIST, teratomas, polyposis syndromes, and appendiceal carcinoid, biliary rhabdomyosarcoma and cholangiocarcinoma, and in the pancreatic tumors, pancreaticoblastoma, Rand's tumor, and genitourinary rare RCC, transitional cell carcinoma of bladder, then neonatal and prepubertal testicular carcinoma, and lastly, malignant melanoma. So to start with, inflammatory myofibroblastic tumors. These are benign solid tumors which have characteristic spindle cell and chronic inflammatory component. The clinical feature is usually based on the site, pulmonary ones present with respiratory symptoms and clubbing, abdominal IMTs present with most commonly abdominal mass, pain, fever, weight loss. They may be present in the mesentery, duodenum, jejunum, pancreas, spleen, liver, and in the thoracic cavity, they may be present in lungs, heart, mediastinum, and trachea. So they have a wide variety of presentations. And diagnosis on biopsy is also by exclusion, though typically spindle cells in a loose myxoid background, as shown in the figure, are seen with an inflammatory infiltrate. The IHC characteristic is reactive to vimentin, SMA, muscle-specific actin, and desmin, and negative for myoglobin and S100 protein. Also, there are cytogenetic studies showing expression of ALK, which may be specific marker to diagnose IMT. The treatment is controversial, and also the radiological findings may be non-specific, and the diagnosis is predominantly by biopsy. And there are a lot of reports which propose conservative treatment as the first-line treatment with antibiotics, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. Also, COX inhibitors have been used, and tumor regression has been noted within 2 to 6 months. There are also reports saying that there is spontaneous regression of inflammatory myofibroblastic tumors. However, in case of non-responsiveness to conservative treatment, surgery is used. Surgery is preferred. Complete resection is done. It also gives us a specific, a confirmed diagnosis and helps rule out malignancy. Recurrence is seen in more than 10% of cases in several reports, and they're attributed to ill-defined margins of these tumors. In cases of inoperable relapsed tumors, which are unresponsive to the conservative line of treatment, chemotherapy has been used in certain cases, predominantly using vincristine etoposide combination, or also cisplatin, adriamycin, and methotrexate have been known to use. Adjuvant radiation therapy has been tried in a few case reports with or without concurrent steroid therapy in cases of unresponsive tumors or residual tumor or recurrent tumor post excision. But they generally are known to have good prognosis. Some other inflammatory tumors that are relatively common are xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. This is a rare, destructive, chronic granulomatous inflammatory process. The differential diagnosis is Wilms tumors. However, the diagnosis is formed by presence of infection and calculi on imaging. This is a CT finding shown here. The treatment is usually with antibiotic coverage and nephrectomy is done. Juvenile xanthogranuloma, this is again another histiocytic proliferative disorder. Both of them have a common xanthogranulomatous inflammation picture. This is benign and self-limiting. It is predominantly a cutaneous manifestation with nodular skin lesion. This is an image showing disseminated lesions. However, they can have extracutaneous manifestation and can present most commonly in head and neck region. In the hand, it is also known as the giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. Disseminated liver, lungs, and lymph nodes. It can be present and provides a poor prognosis. About 5 to 17% of these lesions may be present at birth. And the treatment of choice is surgical resection. And in cases of unresponsive or disseminated lesions, they have tried chemotherapy, which is the Langerhans histiocytosis protocol, which we'll be discussing next. Langerhans cell histiocytosis.
Sorry? Just a second. See, when you go back now, when you're covering each one of them, tell us about how to diagnose, how to pick it up. Because most of these things that what you're talking about are histological surprises that we come to know after the procedure is done. For example, xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. So I would be happy if you tell us about rationale about how to pick it up or what are the clues that you can think of that it is not a Wilms tumor. And why is it that we are doing a nephrectomy? Is it because it's not functioning or the function can't be retrieved? You know what I'm saying? Is it possible?
Yes, from what I read, majority of these, they will also have presence of infection and calculi they point towards diagnosis, however, are not confirmatory. And DMSA scan is done in most of these cases, which show almost non-functioning kidney. And hence, with the presence of infection and poor functioning kidney, nephrectomy is preferred. And the confirmation of diagnosis is usually the specimen histopathology.
Thank you, Vijay. Just what I'm saying is at every level, add a little more about where we are going to say. Let it not be just a list of things which are rare. Tell us about clinical clues, how to pick it up, how to investigate. Is it possible to pick it up and the procedure? That's all. Okay, please go on.
Yes,
You're doing very fine. You're doing very fine.
Coming to Langerhans cells is histiocytosis. These are tumors that arise from the histiocytes. There are antigen processing phagocytes and antigen presenting cells. They are a disorder of the myeloid neoplasia of dendritic cells, and they affect 1 in 2 lakh children and less than 15 years of age. There are several genetic mutations studied. Activation of the RAS, RAF, MEK, ERK oncogenic pathways have been described to be causative in this entity. Many different organs can be affected, including the skeletal system, the skin, lymph nodes, liver, lungs, spleen, the hematopoietic system, and the central nervous system. And this hence leads to diverse clinical manifestation based on the site. And high-risk stratification is reserved for those which infiltrate the blood, spleen, liver, and lungs. So clinically, 2 entities have been described for the purpose of management and prognostication. A single system LCH, which involves a single organ or system, that is the skeleton, skin, or lymph nodes. This has excellent prognosis with treatment. The multicystic Langerhans cell histiocytosis has involvement of 2 or more organ systems and has an unpredictable course. It may spontaneously resolve in few cases, but majority of them have permanent progression and fatal outcome. So the treatment, clinical features in skin, they present with red scaly papules, flexural region, and scalp region. This is there is no distinct clinical finding this way. It can be mistaken for any pediatric rash, hence non-specific. Osteolytic bone lesion may be seen commonly in the vertebral bodies, and they are known to metastasize to the lungs. Primary pulmonary lesions may be present. They usually have a fatal outcome. In the face, they may present as a facial swelling, the neck as cervical lymphadenopathy, and these two have relatively favorable outcomes. CNS involvement is rare but can have pituitary involvement leading to diabetes insipidus. So diagnosis, depending on the site, if it is the pulmonary and bronchial, bronchoscopy may be used for biopsy. X-rays show osteolytic lesions. Skin biopsy in such rashes may be diagnostic. Bone marrow biopsy may be indicated. MRI and CT scanning is used to detect abnormalities of the hypothalamus and pituitary gland in cases of CNS involvement. And in bone lesions, FDG PET may be used to evaluate them. Treatment, the choice of therapeutic regimen is based on the severity. The first line of treatment is chemotherapy. A two-drug combination chemotherapy with vinblastine and prednisolone has been standardized as the effective therapy based on LCT3 trial, which was a prospect randomized control trial. The total duration of treatment is 12 months, and it is recommended for both high risk and low risk categories. Currently, the LCH4 study is underway for tailor-based treatment for different features at presentation. Bone marrow transplantation, it is considered in cases of refractory Langerhans histiocytosis for a potential cure. The role of surgery in this situation is predominantly for biopsy for diagnosis. And in cases of solitary bone lesion, curettage or excision may be indicated. Chemoport insertion, as chemoport is given for a period of 12 months. And in cases of intraspinal involvement by the soft tissue mass, where neurological deficits are severe or do not improve with chemotherapy, and if there is spinal instability, a surgical treatment is recommended, like decompressive surgery.
Once again, sir, you're doing very, very well. I have no problem. What I would request is basically Jyoti and Pooja, because these are rare tumors and we are basically talking about maybe occasional cases. And since the topic is vast and there are so many tumors being covered, it will be useful if there is if it is topically, people can add some take-home points at each stage. For example, as and when we clear an LCH, you can talk about it. Pooja and Jyoti will be very happy to have your input. Because all these cases, sporadically, only one or two cases I have seen in my life. Maybe you will have seen more. So it will be good if you can add some take-home messages and if there's any points to be added.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. So basically, sir, LCH, like you said, it is not a very common this thing which we see. Of course, we must have seen about 8 to 10 cases in the last 3 years. But whatever points she has highlighted, the clinical presentation is more or less similar only. Most commonly, they present with either skin or bone involvement. And they have like seborrheic dermatitis. Like this is a classical case which I'm describing. A child who's usually an infant presenting with seborrheic dermatitis, ear discharge, skin manifestations, and sometimes only with hepatosplenomegaly. So when the infant comes to us with these presentations, one of the very important differential diagnoses that we consider is Langerhans histiocytosis. The diagnosis usually is established by a skin biopsy. And in most of the cases, sometimes in tricky cases, it may be difficult to establish the diagnosis by a skin biopsy. And in those cases, like we might need a lung biopsy or a bone marrow aspiration. But most of the times it's a skin biopsy. And once the diagnosis is established, we need to confirm whether it is single system or multi-organ. And the treatment, basically the duration of chemotherapy varies, like whether it is 6 months or 12 months. So more or less whatever she has described is what we classically see. And the treatment depends on whether it is single system or multi-system. Dr. Jyoti, would you like to add to what I said?
And one thing that surgeons will want to remember is about the surgical management of solitary bone lesions. Usually these children are referred for removal of the bone lesions. Usually excision is not something that is preferred. The appropriate surgical therapy for this would be curettage, because once we excise a bone lesion, it will just leave a cavity with no replacement of bony tissue. But when we curettage is a stimulus for osteoblastic activity, and therefore the cavity heals, filling the cavity up with osteoblastic tissue. So curettage is a therapy of choice and not excision for bone lesions.
Thank you very much, Jyoti and Pooja. And if you have anything else to add about the things which are covered so far, you can. Otherwise, at the end of each small topic that she's talking, it will be great to have your input. I really
Sure, sir.
appreciate both. Thank you.
Sir,
Vidya
Ramesh
Kashyap.
sir, actually, sir, I think skin is the most common presentation, sir. When I was in AIIMS Delhi, within a
Yeah.
3 months, I have seen 2 cases of this one LCH diagnosing by the dermatologist. They have done bone biopsy, then followed by that was diagnosed, sir. So I think skin is the most common presentation in LCH, sir.
Okay.
First, they will visit the dermatologist, sir.
Okay. Point taken. Vidya Kashyap.
Exactly, because this is mainly is reside in the epidermis. The dendritic cell is mainly located in the epidermis and bone marrow and nodes. These are the common sites of presentation. And I think the role of surgery is exactly what she's pointed out is we have been called to put a chemopod insertions, so many patients like this, and also sometimes lymph node biopsy in some of the patients.
Okay. Carry on, Vidya.
Yes, sir. Coming to fibromatosis, fibromatosis is a very wide spectrum of disease where common origin is the collagenoblast, and they may have a wide spectrum from being completely benign to intermediate tumors. In benign and infantile digital fibromatosis, known as a Rayleigh tumor, is common. It is known to have spontaneous regression. Calcifying aponeurotic fibromas may be present. And in the newborns, plantar nodules, which are precalcaneal fibrolipomatous hematomas, may be seen. This is an image showing infantile digital fibroma. These have a conservative excision as they have very low chance of recurrence and are classically benign. However, in cases of low-grade myofibroblastic sarcoma, plexiform fibrohistiocytic tumors, and congenital infantile fibrosarcoma, these are all histopathological diagnoses and they have intermediate potential and high chance of recurrence. A complete excision with margin clearance is recommended. Congenital intestinal fibromatosis also may be seen. They usually present with obstruction or intussusception, and usually excision is curative in these cases. Aggressive fibromatosis is the other end of the spectrum where desmoid tumors are described. They arise from connective tissue of muscle and overlying fascia. They are benign, however, are locally invasive, hence have high recurrence. The peak age of occurrence is 8 years, and they are most commonly sporadic. However, there are associations with familial adenomatosis polyposis, Gardner syndrome. So the treatment, the plan is to biopsy these lesions. Discussion with the pathologist and MRI is done usually for pre-procedure planning for the extent of resection, and CCT chest is done for staging. Surgical excision, there's tendency towards conservative non-mutilating excision plan based on the MRI, and in case of recurrence, a further excision is advised. If complete excision is not possible in case of intra-abdominal mesenteric tumors, a trial of NSAIDs and tamoxifen has been given. However, there are no clear guidelines or protocols prescribed for this. In case of positive margin, there are case reports which have tried combination chemotherapy using vincristine, adriamycin, and cyclophosphamide, and radiotherapy also is known to be used. To vascular tumors, there are malignant.
Vidya, just to add, we've had quite a few patients of this fibromatosis, various types, aggressive, desmoid, recurrent abdominal wall. The point, as you rightly said, is try to see where is it located. For example, if it is in the anterior abdominal wall, you can make a wide excision and put a sort of prosthesis or some mesh or something to replace. But sometimes it is involved with chest case, where we have taken the help of a plastic surgeon to do it. But if it is involved like an axilla, it is much more challenging because it will be sort of very close to the vascular structures and the nerves of the upper limb. So it becomes much more difficult. But as you rightly said, it all depends. We need to balance out between the mutilation versus complete excision. If necessary, since it's essentially benign, it is better to leave behind some and come back and remove another day than to be aggressive and leave a mutilation.
Yes, sir.
Anybody wants to add? You can add. Okay.
Can I proceed?
Please.
Coming to vascular tumors, malignant vascular tumors are very rarely described in pediatric population, which include hemangiosarcoma, malignant hemangioendothelioma, and Kaposi sarcoma. The hemangiosarcoma and hemangioendothelioma, they usually present as soft tissue lesions, which are angiocentric, and diagnosis is mainly by a biopsy. And then clinical features are dependent on the site. In the abdomen, there are few case reports which show that the presentation is by bloody ascites and peritoneal implants in cases of a ruptured tumor. Splenic lesions are noted, and there may be liver metastasis. These are usually diagnosed by biopsy. The treatment of choice is surgical excision, and chemotherapy and radiotherapy are described. However, protocols are not well formed in pediatric population, as there are very few case reports. Kaposi sarcoma, it is classically HIV associated and most commonly occurs as endemic in Africa. 1% it forms about 1% of all vascular tumors. These are known to arise from the pericytes. And as we know, the human herpes virus 8 is involved in the pathogenesis. There are two forms that are described, which is infantile and adult. They're usually benign, and some lesions show spontaneous regression. However, they may also be present in the heart, lung, retroperitoneum, urinary tract as an intra-abdominal mass or subcutaneous tumor. They have wide presentation, and lymph node predominant presentation where there are typical bulging and massive lymphadenopathy are seen, which is characteristic of Kaposi sarcoma. This is different from reactive lymph nodes or infection-related lymph nodes in HIV, which are small lymph nodes and are softer in consistency compared to these. They may show about late recurrence, and on imaging, the lesions may show calcifications. The treatment is complete excision and good remission. With complete excision, there is remission in the infantile type of Kaposi sarcoma. Adjuvant chemotherapy is used if unresectable or if there are positive margins using the Vinca alkaloids, adriamycin and cyclophosphamide. And the other clinical features of this condition are hyperpigmented raised papillar lesions, which may be seen. They have oral mucosal lesions, mainly in the palate, and woody edema may be seen in the inguinal regions, extremities. And in visceral disease, as discussed here, in all these, this is the visceral manifestation. And also another role of surgery for diagnosis, endoscopy may be used, or bronchoscopy for the visceral lesions. Into rare tumors of the head and neck, malignant mesencymoma, it is a rare tumor of mesenchymal origin seen in extremities, back, sacrum, all other, they can be seen in many sites, and head and neck is one of the common sites. Nasopharyngeal carcinoma, it has incidence of about 2 to 3%, has bimodal presentation, the initial peak being during adolescence and later in adulthood. The clinical features, most commonly they present with cervical lymphadenopathy, and the role of surgery is biopsy of the cervical lymph nodes for diagnosis. And treatment is basically by chemotherapy using methotrexate, 5-fluorouracil and cisplatin. It has good response rate, and a remission of 97% is seen. And in radiotherapy is used in as an adjuvant treatment. Salivary gland tumors in pediatric population. This is again very rare. Fewer than 1% of the lesions of head and neck region. There is a case series of about 78 cases, 74 pediatric cases by the Mayo Clinic. The year 2000, it was published. With according to their study, the most common was parotid involvement, and most common benign lesion was the pleomorphic adenoma, followed by hemangioma. And 23% of these cases were malignant. And among malignancy, mucoepidermoid carcinoma was the most common one. And treatment is complete excision. They have formulated a treatment algorithm. In case of solid parotid salivary gland tumor, an MRI or CT scan is done. In case of intraglandular, based on biopsy, if it is malignant, a superficial or a total gland excision is done, with or without neck dissection. Usually a functional neck dissection suffices, and adjuvant chemotherapy or radiotherapy based on the histology subsequently. In case of sarcoma also, chemotherapy and radiation therapy, they form the first line treatment. In case of extraglandular lesions, a wide local excision has been described. However, superficial parotidectomy is more commonly preferred. And mucoepidermoid carcinoma is also known to be present as a secondary malignancy in cases of osteosarcoma, sarcoma, leukemia, and lymphoma, which are earlier treated. Another entity is the synovial sarcoma of larynx. Very few cases are reported. And the treatment is basically by chemotherapy and radiotherapy.
Vidya, hold on. Yeah. Dr.
Yes.
Pooja and the Jyoti madam. See, we had recently had a case of salivary gland tumor, which we actually we did not really diagnose as a tumor in the preoperative stage. We thought it's just like pleomorphic carcinoma and then huge tumor. We excised it.
Okay.
Post-operative came as a mucoepidermoid CA.
Yes.
Intraoperatively, it was actually involving the upper trunk of the facial nerve, which is densely adherent. We are able to separate it and do the surgical component came out well. And then follow-up, they told that only observation is required and nothing was advised. No need for chemotherapy, nothing was advised, only follow-up observation. In fact, you have not removed the deep lobe of parotid. We initially thought we'll go and do a completion parotidectomy. They told nothing is required. So just I wanted your opinion on that.
Okay, there are two things I want to stress on, sir. Like salivary gland tumors, which are rare tumors in childhood, there is a thumb rule that we need to remember about salivary gland tumors in children in comparison with that in an adult. Most salivary gland tumors in children are malignant, unlike in adults where it is benign. I will tell you why it is malignant in children. In adults, we find that small gland tumors are common, like submandibular and sublingual gland tumors. And malignancy is more common in the small glands in adults. Whereas in children, parotid is the most common, salivary gland tumor, and more than 60% are malignant. So we should always think of malignant tumors and try and excise both superficial and deep lobe in the first suspicion of a tumor. The second thing is the mucoepidermoid carcinomas are very low grade in children and they don't really respond to chemotherapy. That is why it's a surgical disease alone.
Sure. Was there a role for going in and complete the remaining part of the parotid?
Yes.
If the margins are positive, yes, sir, we have to remove both lobes of the parotid gland, superficial and deep lobe.
So this,
in this case, the negative, yeah.
Sorry, sir.
In this case, the margins are negative.
Then I guess if margins are negative, then it must be localized to the superficial lobe, as you would have found on imaging. So usually these low-grade carcinomas are not chemoresponsive, sir. So probably that is why they have, suggested for observation. And if it recurs, then probably knocking off whatever tumor has recurred along with the deep lobe would be a better thing to do.
Sure, sure.
So this child was biopsied, sir, before like you clinically a diagnosis of pleomorphic adenoma was established on imaging, or the child was biopsied and the diagnosis was established?
No, initially it was not biopsied.
It was not biopsied, sir. Okay, but would that be a good strategy, sir? Like on imaging, if we are thinking of say a benign tumor also, but to confirm the diagnosis.
Yes, exactly. Good strategy. It was referred from Kidwai, and then it was not biopsied, so we thought actually it anyway requires an excision. So depending on that.
Yeah. Most people usually go ahead with excision upfront because it's so amenable.
So, Jyoti, I would, since you said the incidence of malignancy is more high,
yes,
I have also the impression that whenever the parotid mass presents, we generally think it is a benign one, and we don't normally tend to do biopsy because biopsy is also quite cumbersome.
Yes. Even if it is malignant, the management would be excision itself. So the strategy, I think, is okay, sir. Excision is the treatment of choice, but we should always.
But I think the thing is when to go ahead and complete the excision, sir.
That was our confusion because superficial parotidectomy is okay. Whether to do a complete parotidectomy is our question on the table. So we thought we'll wait for the histopathology report and then decide. So initially we decided to do like a completion parotidectomy. But when we had a discussion, they told no need for a completion. We can wait and watch observation. So the patient is doing well in observation, and then she's following it up.
So let me get back to you on this. I'll do.
Yeah,
some
even I
reading and get
have
back
to
you.
do the reading on the appropriate excision
sir.
methodology, sir. But like I said, we always have to think of malignant tumors first for a parotid gland tumor, and go ahead with treatment as if it is malignant.
Okay, Pooja and
Sure.
Vidya, I'm going to ask on which you will not have the answer right now, but we'll definitely, all of us will think about it.
Yes, sir.
The incidence of malignancy is higher, at least more than 50%, you said 60%. Is there a role for biopsy, look at biopsy or something, not bothered about prognosis? Number two, so that at least when we go inside, we know the of the surgery. It's a total
Yes, sir.
malignancy, not one. Number
Yes,
two, is there a role for frozen section? Number three,
Roll for frozen.
frozen section.
Frozen section.
Okay, I heard. I'm not able to hear you very clearly, sir.
That's okay. Frozen section. Third
Yes, sir.
point I would like to is that is it by going by imaging methods? For example, if the lesion on a CT scan or MRI is to be confined only to the superficial lobe or maybe superficial part in a supra nerve the layer above the nerve, is it
Yes,
okay
sir.
just to attempt to come back, or do we really require to do a surgery? I mean, I understand
Okay,
it's all a tumor. We will research and we will come back to it next.
Ma'am, one more question. Ma'am, FNAC has got good sensitivity in parotid tumors. How is the sensitivity with regard to diagnosis of malignant tumors?
Same thing, Dr. Vinupriya. I think like my experience with this has I've only seen one case, so my experience with the literature is not very good. Let me get back to you on all of this, all the questions that you asked, and whether we can use solely FNAC as a diagnostic modality in this case. Okay, rather than a biopsy.
Yeah, and to add to this, the image, in fact, it was actually occupying only part of the superficial lobe, the image wise, and the CT
Yes, sir.
scan.
Yes, sir.
They looked it's like a very simple parotidectomy, but on the table we found that actually it involved the upper trunk and part of the
Okay, sir.
nerves also. So it
Yes,
was
sir.
not easy to really come to a conclusion with looking at the image what it looked like.
Yes,
And
sir.
it looked like coming from superficial lobe, only part of the superficial lobe, but in reality it was entire superficial lobe is involved.
Okay, so like she said on the diagram, sir, like you thought that it was extraglandular mostly. It didn't look like an intraglandular.
Look like it was
Yes,
nicely mobile and it was easily
Yeah.
looking like that.
Okay, sir.
It looked
We'll
like
get back to you on
extraglandular.
this. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vidya. Go ahead.
Hello.
Okay. Yes.
Pooja madam.
Yes.
Yeah. As Vinupriya asked the extension to that one, basically people will not advocate biopsy.
Okay.
True cut biopsy or FNAC. Even in olden days, they never used to advise even FNAC. They will say that it is not needed in parotid. What is the take
Okay.
on that one? Biopsies. Second
Yes.
thing, I think to Narendra Babu sir, actually adults, I have seen few cases, sir. My boss doing completion parotidectomy after histopathology.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't know about the pediatrics, but in adults, people are doing the completion parotidectomy after.
Yeah, Jagdish, this was our plan, but after discussion with the oncologist, then we decided to wait.
Sir, is this case coming on follow-up, or do we have the contact of this case? We can.
Yeah, we have the
this
contact.
case.
Definitely, we have the contact.
For tumor board, like
Sure,
this
sure,
would be a
sure.
good case.
Ma'am, I have sent the histopathology report of the child to you. We have the
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Vidya.
Yes. Rare tumors of the chest. These include mediastinal tumors, which is most commonly thymic tumors. Thymic tumors may be cysts or thymic hyperplasia may be present in the mediastinum. And they have usually respiratory symptoms, varied respiratory symptoms, or they may be incidentally detected on an X-ray. These form about less than 1% of childhood mediastinal tumors. In cases of benign thymoma, a complete excision is advised. In malignant thymoma, the staging is Masaoka staging is used, and that is the prognostic factor. Stage 1 is totally encapsulated. Stage 2 will show capsular invasion or invasion into surrounding fat or pleura. Stage 3, invasion into organs, pericardium, the lung, or the great vessels. Stage 4A has pleural or pericardial implants, and D, hematogenous metastasis. So the treatment is aggressive in this case. Complete thymectomy with removal of all surrounding mediastinal fat and surrounding pleura if possible to attain a negative surgical margin. This is what is followed. And in case of invasive tumors, an adjuvant chemotherapy and radiotherapy is suggested. Chemotherapy, no regimen has been established. There are different drug combinations which are used, including cisplatin, doxorubicin, cyclophosphamide, prednisone, and in adults also octreotide and sunitinib has been tried. Tracheal and bronchial tumors. 1/3 of these tumors are carcinoid. 1/4 are bronchogenic carcinoma. 9% may be mucoepidermoid carcinoma. 8% pleuropulmonary blastomas. They clinically present with hemoptysis, pneumonia, or other respiratory symptoms. And carcinoid diagnosis requires octreotide scan, which this may be helpful as somatostatin receptors are targeted. And treatment is usually by complete resection, which may include lobectomy, pneumonectomy. Lung-sparing surgeries have been described, including bronchoplastic procedures. An endoscopic treatment is usually discouraged because of recurrences, and it is performed only as palliative treatment and in patients who are not fit for surgery. VATS may be used for bronchial carcinoma, however, is tricky because of the endobronchial location. A stapling of the bronchus has to be done well above the tumor to avoid spread, and it can be used in cases which have clear-cut diagnosis of carcinoid, which may be peripherally or centrally located, but without any hilar or mediastinal lymph node involvement, and in patients with a normal respiratory function. And in these cases, intra-op frozen section is usually recommended.
Just in case of carcinoids, no, is there any role for conservative surgery? Just wanted to know. No, because most of them with the lobectomy or say the pneumonectomy. What is the role for conservative surgeries only in
classically described are lobectomy in the textbook. However, some of the articles suggest lung-sparing surgeries again with use of frozen section intra.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And some other very rare tumors of the chest include carcinogenous neoplasm of the bronchus, which is associated with Maffucci syndrome, and the presentation was with obstructive symptoms. This was managed with endoscopic laser ablation. This is a this is a CT image showing intraluminal mass in the left bronchus in case of a carcinoid tumor. The other rare tumor is a pleuropulmonary blastoma. These 25% of these are extrapulmonary and have metastasis to CNS. They may be associated with CCAM, that is congenital cystoadenomatoid malformation, and cystic lesions of kidney like cystic nephroma. The treatment is usually surgical excision, and they have poor prognosis. Chemotherapy is tried in metastatic diseases. And cystic adenomatoid malformations of the lung and malignant tumors. These are mesenchymomas and rhabdomyosarcoma, which arise from pre-existing CCAM. Tumors of the diaphragm are very rare, about 41 cases reported. Majority of them are malignant, about 50% are rhabdomyosarcoma, and they may present with chest or abdominal symptoms. And based on the histology, treatment is planned with pre-op chemotherapy to enable complete excision.
Vidya,
Yes, sir?
I think we had one case of mucoepidermoid carcinoma of the right upper lobe bronchus. Pooja may remember this. In fact, this is checked where they had chemotherapy.
Remember.
And we finally did a right upper lobectomy, and we are very concerned about the margins. Luckily, we could achieve a tumor-free margin in the right upper lobe bronchus stump itself. So we could spare the right mid lobe and the lower lobe. Otherwise, we would have had to do a pneumonectomy. We are quite the same. Do you remember this case, Pooja?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I remember that child. We discussed it in the tumor board also, sir, this child.
And the last time, anyway, the only time.
Next would be breast masses. Malignant breast tumors are very rare in pediatric age group and rare in less than 20 years of age. 1/3 of these arise from primary breast tissue, and the rest are known to arise from non-breast tissue, including rhabdomyosarcoma or metastasis. For primary breast tissue lesions, there are genetic exposure predisposition is known as the BRCA1 and 2 or Li-Fraumeni syndrome, or exposure to ionizing radiation. The primary breast carcinoma may be lobular intraductal cystosarcoma phylloids, and most commonly the secreting adenocarcinoma is known to be most common in pediatric age group, which form about 84%. Even medullary and inflammatory types of CA breast are also known. There are a few case reports of those. Metastatic may be adenocarcinoma, osteosarcoma, or histiocytic lymphoma, and secondary breast carcinomas also are known to occur. The diagnosis is usually by imaging, ultrasonography, and supplemented by mammography. MRI and PET are useful in doubtful cases. FNAC in pediatric age group has a limited role because of pain and fear, and excision biopsy has the risk of injury to breast bud. The treatment in the subsequent slide I'll be discussing. And benign breast masses are most commonly fibroadenomas, which may be closely followed up in most cases. Only if symptoms are bothersome, an excision biopsy may be considered. However, we have to be very vigilant about possibility of phyllodes in these cases, as 25% cases are malignant and surgical excision will be required in a phyllodes tumor. In cases because phyllodes tumor excision has to be done with 1 centimeter margin to prevent recurrence. And in management of malignant breast tumors, since there is a lack of enough data because of the rarity of the condition, surgical management remains controversial, and most of the guidelines are based on adult management of CA breast. Complete resection has to be done in all cases, which will involve modified radical mastectomy. However, maintaining normal breast development should be considered whenever possible. That is the breast conservation surgery. And the need for axillary lymph node dissection or axillary staging is again unclear in these cases. About 9.7% nodal metastasis is seen in secretory carcinoma, which is the common type. Hence, lymph node staging is recommended in all patients. An axillary ultrasound may be done as a part of preclinical preoperative workup, as in adults, and then we can decide upon lymph node dissection. And again, extrapolating from the management in adults, sentinel lymph node biopsy also is recommended in cases of clinically node negative cases, and axillary dissection is done for node positive cases. Hence, based on the suspected histopathology or biopsy report, we may come up with a plan for these cases. Radiation and chemotherapy are often associated with a high risk of subsequent cancer in these patients. Hence, the risk and benefit have to be carefully considered, and based on the stage of the disease and tumor type, we have to decide regarding chemotherapy. Continuing with rare abdominal tumors, those abdominal tumors involving peritoneum, omentum, and mesentery. Mesenteric tumors are often cystic tumors and are benign. The most common of these are cystic lymphangiomas, which simple excision will suffice in treating these cases. In cases of peritoneal sarcoma, they are usually large, and neoadjuvant chemotherapy is required to make them operable. And peritoneal mesothelioma, there are two types: the classic and three types: classic, multicystic, and mesothelioma in children. The classic is the adult asbestos-related version, in which most commonly pleura is involved. Multicystic is seen in young women where pelvic peritoneum is involved, and treatment for these cases is mostly cytoreduction, as complete removal is difficult. Peritoneectomy can be done. Chemotherapy is adriamycin or cisplatin based, and HIPEC is considered as a part of chemotherapy. Desmoplastic round cell tumors. These are tumors arising from the soft tissues with mesothelial lining. There is a male preponderance in these tumors and have an adolescent onset. This is an locally aggressive tumor with and also known to metastasize to lymph nodes, liver, and lungs. They may be present as in case of paratesticular or ovarian tumors. The treatment is usually multi-drug chemotherapy, and only 50% of these are responsive to chemotherapy. A surgical excision again is aimed at cytoreduction, as complete excision is usually not possible and residual disease will be present. It has grave prognosis with median survival of about 17 months. Even in this condition, HIPEC has been tried. However, there is no formed protocol for the same. Other lesions are lipoblastoma, known as infantile lipoma, which is treated by excision. This is a benign lesion of embryonal fat. Liposarcoma, again, only 5 cases are reported, and 2 of them are from porta, were seen in the region of porta hepatis. Liposarcoma were known for high recurrence rate. Surgery followed by chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Then protocols are based on adult cases. There are no specific form protocol for pediatric cases. Tumors of the gastrointestinal tract again form a wide spectrum, and majority of them are malignant, and more than 50% are related to lymphomas. Carcinoma esophagus is very rare, may be seen in cases with GERD or Barrett's esophagus. Smooth muscle tumors are associated usually with HIV-infected children. Abdominal leiomyosarcoma is seen in very long-term survivors of childhood cancers. So the 2 smooth muscle tumors include leiomyoma and leiomyoblastoma. These are benign lesions occurring early in age, and most common presentation is intestinal obstruction by intussusception and anemia due to bleeding. The most common site is stomach, and treatment is by excision, and it is curative. Leiomyosarcoma forms about 7% of all childhood tumors, and 2% leiomyoma of intestines is 2% of all soft tissue sarcoma in children. The most common site is jejunum, and about more than 50% of these are known to occur in newborns. The other risk factors include poor immunity in cases of post-organ transplant or HIV infection. It is known to be highly malignant, and wide surgical excision is recommended. Gastrointestinal stromal tumors, about more than 50 cases are reported in the pediatric age group. These are mesenchymal tumors, and cells of origin are similar to the interstitial cells of Kayal. They express CD117. It's an antigenic epitope of the receptor tyrosine kinase KIT, and 88% of these are present in the stomach. They may also be seen in small bowel and colon, and clinically they present with abdominal pain, anemia due to bleeding, or as an abdominal mass most commonly. Metastasis may be seen in the peritoneum, liver, or lymph nodes, and prognostic factors are dependent on mitotic activity, the Ki67 index, the tumor size, tumor site. Gastric and colonic have better outcome compared to small bowel. And Carney's triad, which composes the gastric gist, extraadrenal paragangliomas, and pulmonary chordomas, and this usually has very poor prognosis. Treatment is basically surgical resection. A complete gross resection is aimed at, and imatinib mesylate has been known to, the tyrosine kinase inhibitor is known to have 50% response rate and is usually used as adjuvant treatment. Gastric teratomas. Gastric teratomas are more commonly seen in boys and are usually benign. The malignant degeneration rate is very rare. They present with abdominal pain, mass, gastric outlet obstruction, or bleeding, and complete resection is done. No recurrence is noted, hence partial gastrectomy or subtotal gastrectomy may be done depending on the site of the lesion. This is an image showing a 6-month-old child with gastric teratoma, and it is commonly exophytic, large exophytic lesion as shown in the image. Gastric carcinoma, there are very few case reports, may be associated with H. pylori infection or occur as secondary tumor after lymphoma treatment. They may present with pain, abdominal pain, dyspeptic symptoms, and vomiting. Usually there is a delay in diagnosis, and this can be avoided by early imaging and upper GI endoscopy when patients present with such symptoms. Treatment is by surgery, similar as in adult cases, without chemotherapy based on staging. Intestinal polyps and polyposis syndrome. Juvenile polyps are hematomatous benign polyps, most commonly presenting with bleeding PR or prolapse of the polyp, and 80% of these are solitary rectal polyps and may be seen in other sites in the GIT. Colonoscopy is usually done when patients present with bleeding PR and rectal polyp may not be visualized. Endoscopic excision in case of a solitary polyp is done. And generalized juvenile polyposis, when there are more than 200 hematomatous polyps throughout the GIT, Most common site is the colon, and 85% of children have a positive family history and genetic involvement. And infantile form, they may present with protein losing enteropathy, anemia, and hypoproteinemia. These cases have poorer prognosis, and 18 to 35% of these may undergo malignant transformation by the age of 35 years. The treatment of choice is colectomy with anal sphincter saving procedure to avoid this risk of malignancy. Peutz-Jeghers syndrome is an autosomal dominant condition with incidence of 1 in 1,20,000. With multiple hematomatous polyps throughout the GIT. Small bowel is the most common site, 96%. And the other classical clinical symptom is the abnormal melanin deposit in the lips, skin, and mucous membrane. And in the labial pigmentation, as shown in the figure, forms a reliable marker. Genetic mutation of STK11 or LKB1 may be seen on chromosome 19. And the natural history is that the polyps grow in the first decade and usually manifest clinically by the second decade of life. Clinically, they may present with bowel obstruction, intussusception, or anemia. And in less than 16 years of age, gastroduodenal region is the most common site. They may also have, since this syndromic and with genetic mutation, other malignancies like adenocarcinoma, ovarian, and testicular carcinoma are known to be associated. Familial adenomatous polyposis is another autosomal dominant with APC gene mutation. Tendency to develop CA colon is known, and screening is done by colonoscopy. And to eliminate the risk of malignant degeneration, even in this condition, total colectomy with rectal mucosectomy and ileoanal anastomosis such as J pouch is done. They have high complication rate of 41%. The procedure itself, most commonly the late complication like pouchitis and diarrhea and stasis of stools, and they also have tendency for hepatoblastoma and Gardner syndrome. Colorectal carcinoma forms about less than 1% of all colonic malignancies with extremely poor prognosis because of late detection, high incidence of signet cell carcinoma, anaplastic carcinoma, and regional metastasis at diagnosis in about 75%, so very poor survival. Complete resection is aimed at, followed by chemotherapy, 5-fluorouracil and leucovorin-based chemotherapy. It is also seen in cases post-uretrosigmoidostomy and bubble when used in urinary tract reconstruction. The adenocarcinoma has time lag of more than 20 years and seen in adulthood. Coming to carcinoid, the most common site is appendix, followed by small bowel and rectum. Appendiceal carcinoid is known to occur in adolescents and late childhood. Predominance of occurrence in girls more than boys, about 3:1, with a median age in the preteen 12 to 13 years. Most commonly, it is incidentally in appendicectomy specimen in about 0.2 to 0.7% of appendectomy specimen. And clinically, they present as appendicitis or abdominal pain. Carcinoid syndrome, the classical presentation is not with wheezing and diarrhea, flushing. This is usually not seen in pediatric age group and seen only in cases of advanced or metastatic disease. Most commonly, it is localized to the tip of appendix in 75%, mid portion followed by base in just 5%. Serum chromogranin A is a useful IHC marker in cases of carcinoid, and other markers including serotonin and its metabolite in the urine. Octreotide scan may be used with CT scan of lungs and bone scan to rule out metastasis. Incidence of metastasis in these cases is about 1.6%. The treatment is based on the size and site along with prognostic factors. Less than 2 centimeter near the tip, a simple appendectomy is curative. However, more than 2 centimeter with mesoappendiceal invasion more than 3 millimeter and high proliferative rate of Ki67 index more than 2%, these are considered for a right hemicolectomy. This is a staging used for carcinoid tumors. And regarding patients who present with appendiceal perforation at presentation then turn out to have carcinoid, there is no specific guidelines issue. However, certain authors describe to go ahead with right hemicolectomy in such cases. Rare tumors of the bile duct. Biliary rhabdomyosarcoma, less than 40 cases have been reported with obstructive jaundice at presentation. Diagnosis is by ultrasound and CT is used. CT versus MRCP, it is a choice of the surgeon. They have poor prognosis and 40% are metastatic at presentation. But however, the local growth is usually the cause of death. In case of resectable mass, a complete excision is done, followed by chemotherapy. In case of residual disease or positive lymph nodes or relapse, chemotherapy and radiotherapy is given. Chemotherapy with ifosfamide, etoposide, or the VAC regimen, followed by a second look surgery. In case of extensive disease, chemotherapy is given with a trial of second look surgery and radiotherapy. In case of biliary obstruction, a palliative stenting may be performed. Biliary adenocarcinoma or cholangiocarcinoma, high risk is seen in colorectal cysts and abnormal pancreaticobiliary junction. It is seen in 20 to 25% of untreated cases, and also associated with primary sclerosing cholangitis in cases and childhood onset inflammatory bowel disease. Incidence increases with age, 0.3% in children and 15.6% in adulthood, and less than 10% of these are resectable. Hence, they have very poor survival, and complete CDC excision, choledochocyst excision, eliminates the risk of malignant degeneration. Treatment of cholangiocarcinoma is surgery as in adults, followed by reconstruction, and chemotherapy with the cisplatin and gemcitabine. Pancreaticoblastoma is known to be a rare tumor of the pancreas. It's a malignant epithelial tumor with mainly acinar differentiation. AFP levels may be raised, and in early childhood and neonates, it is present in early childhood. In neonates, antenatal diagnosis is usually possible. The associations are with Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome and mutation of beta-catenin gene. They may present at any part of the pancreas. They present clinically with abdominal mass, pain, weight loss, jaundice in about 10% of the cases, and metastasis are diagnosed in 17 to 35%. The diagnosis is by imaging, CT, and FNAC is done for confirmation. Treatment is complete resection with or without neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Neoadjuvant chemotherapy is done in large lesions where primary resection may not be possible, with vincristine, actinomycin, cisplatin, and doxorubicin. Chemotherapy, usually cisplatin and doxorubicin, are used in unresectable recurrent or metastatic tumors. The other rare pancreatic tumor is the Franz tumor, which is the solid pseudopapillary tumor of pancreas. It is seen majority females and in Africans and Asians. Tail of the pancreas is the most common site, and it is localized tumor and has a low-grade malignant potential. They may present with GI symptoms and a palpable mass clinically. Imaging CT is done, which has non-specific findings, in this case showing a heterogeneous lesion, and FNAC is done for diagnosis. Complete excision has to be done with margin. Frozen section is recommended to know the margin clearance. Lymph node dissection is not recommended as it is a low-grade malignant tumor, and it has good prognosis post-surgery. Pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, very few cases are reported. Aggressive surgical management is recommended, like in adults, Whipple's procedure or distal pancreatectomy based on the site of the tumor. Malignant endocrine pancreatic tumors most commonly are insulinomas in children, followed by gastrinomas. They are usually benign lesions with 6% incidence of malignancy. However, may be metastatic at diagnosis, because the diagnosis is usually delayed in these children because of presentation with non-specific symptoms. 10% are associated with Meniere's syndrome, and the rest with tuberous sclerosis complex may be seen. Insulinomas, the symptoms are typical of hypoglycemia, and Whipple's triad may be seen. Differential diagnosis is the congenital hyperinsulinism, which is a hyperinsulinomic hyperglycemia in infancy, and nesidioblastosis is the cause of congenital hyperinsulinism, and the diagnosis is by histopathology. For localization of insulinoma, we do a CT, abdominal ultrasound may be used, or PET-CT. The treatment is by exploratory laparotomy. Lesion is identified by palpation, intraop, and endoscopic ultrasound can be used intraop to localize the lesion. Surgery is the mainstay of treatment, and pancreas sparing surgery is preferred. Enucleation is the surgery. Enucleation, the most commonly performed surgery for this entity. Subtotal pancreatectomy or lesionectomy also is done with pancreaticojejunostomy, or distal pancreatectomy in case of lesions in the tail region. Long-term survival for non-malignant disease is about 80 to 90% survival. Gastrinomas, the definitive diagnosis of gastrinoma is based on high levels of serum gastrin fasting, which is more than 1000 picogram per ml. Pancreatic gastrinomas are usually large and they're present in the Passaro's triangle, which is 85% to 95%. They may be benign or malignant. And malignancy rate is close to 30%. They
What
have
is the
poor.
Passaro's?
Sorry, sir?
Passaro's triangle? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Passaro's triangle is formed by the junction of common bile duct and common hepatic duct, then duodenojejunal and
Okay, go ahead.
the pylorus.
Go ahead.
They have malignancy rate is as high as 30%. They have poor prognostic factors including liver, lymph node metastasis, large tumor more than 3 centimeter, and short history of disease, and inadequate control of gastric hypersecretion. So the treatment is by following pre-op localization of gastrinoma. It may be done by endoscopic ultrasound or nuclear medicine studies like the gallium dotatate PET-CT, followed by surgical excision. Rare tumors of the genitourinary system, renal cell carcinoma, they may present with hematuria, pain, polycythemia, or may be asymptomatic. And the predictors or outcome depends on the stage and complete surgical excision. Treatment is primarily by nephrectomy, though nephron-sparing surgeries are also advised, with or without excision of metastatic lesions. Transitional cell carcinoma of bladder is again very rare. The risk is bladder augmentation, and it is seen after a lag period of about 10 years. Imaging is most sensitively, ultrasound is used for diagnosis, followed by urine cytology, and then cystoscopic biopsy may be used. Cystic partially differentiated nephroblastoma has been earlier discussed during nephroblastoma discussion. It is a rare histological entity where well-demarcated cystic lesion of the kidney is seen. Diagnosis is by MRI and treatment is by surgery. And in stage 1, surgery alone will suffice, and followed by chemotherapy. Rare tumors continued. Lymphomas, B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma has been reported as a primary renal tumor. There's another case report of a prostatic tumor of non-Hodgkin lymphoma managed with chemotherapy. Prepubertal testicular tumors, neonatal testicular tumors, about 22 cases have been reported, including yolk sac tumor, gonadal stromal tumor, granulosa cell tumor, and gonadoblastoma teratoma. They tend to have normal AFP without metastasis and have good prognosis following surgery. The other prepubertal testicular tumors, germ cell tumor is the most common, and usually the treatment is high inguinal orchidectomy. If tumor markers are normal and the testis is salvageable, an excision biopsy of frozen section can be considered, and preservation of testis may be considered if the margin is negative. Ectomesencymoma, it is a rare malignant non-epithelial tumor with 2 or more cell types of ectoderm or the mesenchyme. They are also known as Triton tumors, primary osteochondrorhabdomyosarcoma, or variant of malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor. They are associated with neurofibromatosis 1, and wide local excision is done in these cases. Malignant melanoma is the last topic for discussion today. It forms about 1 to 3% of pediatric malignancies and most commonly seen in adolescents. 0.3% of these are seen in prepubertal children. The risk factors are giant congenital melanocytic nevus, about 5 to 10%, familial atypical mole, which is about 100% risk, treatment with chemotherapy for malignancy, retinoblastoma, and xeroderma pigmentosa, which has 2,000 times increased risk. The importance is that diagnosis is often missed in these pediatric cases and have metastasis as diagnosis. And most of these cases arise within pre-existing lesions, 30% from the giant congenital melanocytic nevus. Hence, prophylactic excision of giant CMN can be done. It is defined as those melanocytic nevi covering 1% of body surface area in head and neck and 2% elsewhere in the body. And clinically, we have to observe a change in nevus size, color, symmetry, and bleeding, which should raise suspicion. And an excision biopsy has to be done for lesions less than 15 millimeter. 1 to 2 millimeter margin is sufficient, and full thickness has to be excised. And treatment is by radical excision with adequate margin. Enlarged lymph nodes if present, regional lymph node dissection is done. If not enlarged, among lesions 1 to 4 millimeter thickness, a sentinel lymph node biopsy is done, followed by histopathology and IHC. If positive, a completion regional lymph node dissection has to be done. These are the margin recommendations for excision, which are less than 1 millimeter, 1 centimeter, and more than 4 millimeter, 3 centimeter margin. And chemotherapy has been attempted with vincristine, cyclophosphamide, and actinomycin. And immunotherapy has been tried with interferon alpha 2b. And prognosis is usually based on the stage. Conclusion: rare tumors of childhood provide unique challenges for studying rare cancers, as there is paucity of basic research, very few resources devoted to these cases, and there's usually delay in recognition and diagnosis. Limited treatment options are available due to lack of evidence, and most of them are advanced stage at the time of diagnosis, and hence have decreased survival rates. Thank you.
Vidya, good presentation. So actually, from my side, what I say is that since we took nearly more than an hour, when she presented, when she gave me that presentation to me, I went through that. So since many of them are rare, and we discuss these rare things rarely, that's why I thought we'll allow the whole discussion. So I did not really cut too much, and I only told her to do a little more presentation on common things, what we saw that. So in our experience, actually, we have seen biliary RMS also, insulinoma, and then like gastric teratomas, LCH, and many other things. But many of them are very, very rare. We are actually not seen in our experience. So I just open this discussion for others to give their valuable input.
Thank you, Narendra. What you did is perfectly right, because these are rare, but it's good to know because we don't know when we are going to get. As Narendra said, these are all rare. We have seen quite a few, one and here and there, series. For example, the collective, perhaps Ramchandra sir, myself, Srimurthy, and even Narendra Babu and the rest of the team, should not be more than about a handful of cases. So it is rare. But anyway, I'll open the discussion to Jyoti and Pooja.
Yes, sir. I think, like sir said, it's a pretty exhaustive list that we saw. But out of those, the ones that we have actually seen, I think to summarize, if we were to say, we've definitely seen biliary RMS, LCH, inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor, infantile fibrosarcoma, and parotid tumors. So these are the ones that we.
Renal cell carcinoma, I have seen too.
Yes, sir. Like once we were there in our posting, those children were coming under follow-up, but they had undergone excision and no chemotherapy was given. So these are the common tumors that we have seen in our 3 years of experience at Kidwai, sir. But like you said, the rest of the tumors are good to know, but at least these are the ones that we should definitely know because we will commonly encounter them.
Exactly. Yeah. So xanthogranulomatosis pyelonephritis also seen. And then, like insulinoma, actually, KRS is operated on insulinoma.
Yes, sir.
One biliary RMS we saw.
Yes, sir.
Actually, Ramchandra sir remembers it. We called Sadik Sikura to operate on the baby. So he came and operated in Indira Gandhi. So that time we are able to completely excise as far as the lesion is concerned. But post-operatively, patient had recurrence within 4 months and had a very recurrence, not responding to chemotherapy. Then we went through the literature search, and we thought neoadjuvant chemotherapy would have been better for her.
Definitely. Definitely. So we've also
very, very few and very limited.
Yes, sir. We've also seen one biliary RMS in our 3 years, and that boy actually he underwent biopsy at a center in West Bengal, and it was quite a complicated case. Like the biopsy sort of got messed up, and they had to put a DJ stent because he had obstructive jaundice. And post biopsy, once the diagnosis was established, they attempted a resection, but once they opened up, it was so adherent that they could not operate. Then they referred to us for neoadjuvant chemotherapy at Kidwai. We gave neoadjuvant chemotherapy, but in spite of that, the lesion was not excisable. So in that case, what we did for local control was radiotherapy. In that child, still the excision, as far as I know, has not been performed, and local control was achieved by radiotherapy. I have seen that child on follow-up about 2 or 3 months ago. He was doing fine, but after that, I really don't know what has happened to that child, sir. But they are quite surgically challenging, like you said, sir. It's not easy to operate on these cases.
Definitely.
Jyoti?
Nothing from my side, sir. Like the common ones that we've seen is like what Dr. Pooja said. The rest I've not seen, so it was new to me also.
Okay, thank you. Ramchandra, sir?
Sir,
Ramchandra, sir?
Yeah, Ramesh, I like that nice touch of putting the zebra as a background slide. So I would have preferred a black swan in the zebra, but it's a good touch. You know, zebra is very rare, and these are rare tumors. So I like that touch of putting a zebra.
Thank you.
Black swan would have been better. It would have given a better connotation
Noted.
because of the seriousness and the rarity of these conditions. Yeah, as everyone has pointed out, these are rare, and they have to be rare because that's what the statistics tells us. So most of us will encounter one, or would have heard of one described by our chiefs, or we have read in the literature. So that is the experience.
Vidya, very, very nice presentation. And I like the exhaustive, tough topic, but you covered it well. Like Ramchandra sir says, I'm very, very happy about one thing because the level of discussions has really gone up well. It has been eye-opener for most of us, including the seniors. It gives us a very easy inside view because we're giving you the topic, you're going through it all and presenting to us. It saves us the labor of reading it. And the discussion has been top class. Thank you very much, Jyoti and Pooja. It has been wonderful.